Hi, this is Dr. John Grazel, and this is another of our synoptic videos. It particularly focuses on the role that President Eisenhower played in the recasting of American foreign assistance, a much unappreciated role. And to understand that role, you really have to put three things together. You have to put together what we're going to discuss in this video, what he did directly in terms of foreign assistance, and then you have to put it in the context of a much larger dream he had, an understanding, an aspiration that he called waging peace. And then, in addition, you have to understand that his motivations and his emphasis on the importance of fundamental and foundational principles in American life and in his own life and in both the crafting and implementation of policy. But let's now quickly get to this issue, which is what did Eisenhower have to do with American foreign assistance? It began by understanding that, first of all, Eisenhower had a doctrine of mutual security. He believed that the security of the United States had to be guarded not only by its military, but by a program that truly helped change the realities of the developing world. He was very acutely aware of the phenomenon of nationalism and the need to create hope, aspirations, and capacities in the new nations of the world in the face of what was actually a communist claim to offer a better alternative than ours. So he believed that international assistance was, in some cases, more important than military assistance for the mutual security of the United States and other nations. He had two aspects to that: a grand dream and what I would call the more pragmatic small dream. Now, the grand dream was his waging peace. His small dream was a reformulated, realistic foreign assistance program, and that's available in memos, particularly between him and C.D. Jackson, who was actually on leave from Time magazine and helped him a great deal, as well as from memos to John Foster Dulles, from the director of the Agency for Cooperation Administration, and actually from C.D. Jackson to Eisenhower. Then, an additional interesting element was the fact that to realize that you had not only Eisenhower and this core group of people he relied upon, but he had gone through an exercise of actually gathering opinions from a broader spectrum of America, a series of trade organizations, of particular academic groups, of individuals. And this is basically what they said. Basically, they said, we need a program that is not just short-term, but long-term. We need a program that doesn't just give technical assistance, but gives funding, but funding that they wanted was what they called bankable loans. And now, it's important to understand what he meant by bankable loans. Eisenhower came from a small town, and a bankable loan means that you really believe in what you're doing. The institution that is lending the money knows who you are. They really believe in what you're doing, and both of you are taking responsibility for the success of what you're doing, and realize that if it doesn't succeed, you're both going to suffer, and therefore you assess it accurately. And in fact, what drove Eisenhower to want to do bankable loans rather than grants was actually more this concept of responsibility taking by both the person who lends and the person who takes a loan, than the fact that he thought that the United States couldn't afford otherwise to fund development. He said we also need to have a cadre of true professionals who can run this program. Hollister said, and this is back in the 50s, said we have 8,000 programs in 50 countries. How can one even explain it? Well, the last estimate I saw was there are 900,000 development projects in the world. So even at that time, they were aware we can't just keep doing this ad hoc. We have to have true professionals involved in order to implement that in a serious way. And what's interesting about that is we're not only talking about Eisenhower, but his assistants who tended to be Republican, very business oriented, and in many cases, what today would be considered very conservative. They wanted to put together this very professionally focused program of foreign assistance. A final element was the unique desire to actually have the foreign assistance program guided by a group of involved citizens that were connected to the ordinary citizen. And this was conceived as something more than just an advisory board. It was really conceived of trying to get the foreign assistance program directly connected in a dynamic fashion to the American people. Now, what happened when they tried to do that? Well, what you see out of the documents was that they came across the stumbling block of congressional political realities. The very things they were advocating, which was professionalism, long-term concerns, a sense of mutual security, not a predominant interest is only in our security, all of these conflicted with the realities of American congressional politics, which are short-term and very constituent-oriented. And basically, Eisenhower had to come to terms with the fact that he could not get that grander picture, but what he did get was he increased the understanding of the need for foreign aid. He actually got several major new initiatives of foreign aid, such as in India with the Indus Valley. He did plant the seeds, which he didn't actually reap, but came with the establishment of USAID, of creating a professional cadre who had career interests and career dedication to development. He did get the acceptance that loans were a critical element of funding. He did get, to an extent, an understanding that development assistance and military assistance are not the same thing. He wanted them totally separated. In fact, they have been separated, but there's always been some military assistance under the Foreign Assistance Act that we now have because Congress tends to vote when there's a military budget. So he succeeded basically in putting forth the elements of the professional continuing administrative structure that was then picked up by Kennedy and actually formalized with the creation of USAID. And his arguments are so pertinent that, in fact, one of the most interesting documents we have is a memo from Hollister, the director of ICA, to John Foster Dulles, in which he outlines all the problems that exist with foreign assistance, from people not understanding it, from there not being consistency, from the lack of evaluations, from the difficulties of getting consistent, assured funding to the end of a project. You could take the date out, put the date in today, and there would be almost no difference. So that the problems that they faced are still the problems today. The very fact that the problems are the same today has to make us reflect as to whether we really made the progress we could have. And I think if we do that, we will find out that we haven't. And if we ask why, I would put to you the answer is we could never understand or accept Eisenhower's grander vision called waging peace. However, this is the final irony. He actually failed in one of the most important that he wanted, which is the idea of foreign assistance as being guided, connected to, accepted by, and supported by the American people directly. And that never came into existence. Quite the opposite, in fact. To some extent, what came into existence was an international development uh, government complex, much like the military industrial complex that he warned about in his final speech.